Outer Wilds is a superbly stellar space adventure game that is extremely difficult to talk about without spoilers. The game's core mechanic is based on an idea so brilliant that to reveal it outside of the context of the player's own discovery would be shameful. But if I want to discuss the beauty of Outer Wilds, there are some pieces of its puzzle that I have no choice but to reveal. I in no way intend to spoil the ending or major plot beats, but if you're at all interested in this interstellar adventure with clever puzzles, ingenious writing, and so much more, well, now's your chance to go and try it for yourself. It's linked in the description. If that's the case, thanks for watching and take it easy. With the spoiler warning out of the way, I'll continue. In Outer Wilds, you are a wonderful little alien creature taking their first step off of their small, rustic planet in a spaceship to explore the galaxy around. There's planets and stations and asteroids and a charming little moon. Each astral body has its own gravity, so you're free to land wherever you want and explore for as long as your spacesuit has oxygen and fuel. There are 2 planets which orbit so closely to each other that the very sand which makes up their collective surface constantly shifts between the 2 bodies. There's an aquatic world full of islands with winds so powerful the islands are launched into low orbit before plummeting back down to the sea below. There's an overgrown bramble which seems to defy the laws of physics, growing larger as you wander inside and eventually recursively overflowing back out of itself. And like any planetary system which can support life as we know it, a sun shines bright in the center. Truly massive in scale. In fact, it seems to be growing bigger and bigger until 22 minutes. Outer Wilds takes place over 22 minutes at absolute most, despite my well over 22 hours in the title. At the end of this preset time frame, the sun in your little system goes supernova, obliterating all life. At which point, for reasons you do not start the game understanding, your memories are sent backwards in time 22 minutes to when you first awaken on your home planet. Effectively, despite the you of the then being destroyed, all of the ideas that make up you as a person, all those experiences are preserved. In essence, this is time travel ad infinitum, if only 22 minutes backwards in time. The only limitation becomes one's capacity for memory rather than physical age of your body. Outer Wilds is a true time loop game where nothing is preserved except for the player's experience. The only thing you gain from exploration in any given time loop is knowledge. The more knowledge you have, the closer you come to solving the riddle of escaping the time loop without simply dying. Other time loop games, most famously Zelda Majora's Mask, cheat the idea of the time loop by allowing some equipment and money to be transferred between loops. While this is fine for the kind of game that was, the idea of a game in which literally everything but the player's own memories is reset fascinates me. Unfortunately, as a result of this mechanic, Outer Wilds is a game that can only ever truly work a single time per player. Not a single loop, but a single start to finish experience. Every planet has a set schedule it keeps, each puzzle a set of conditions which must be met, and once the player understands how to overcome the tasks in front of them, it only takes 22 minutes at most to do so. Purely off the basis of reaching the credits, Outer Wilds can be beaten in about 9 minutes. There's no combat to speak of, no dungeons to loot, no currency to build up, at least not traditionally speaking. The same set of events occur over every 22-minute loop of Outer Wilds. There are only 3 variable factors, and one of them is a bit of a spoiler, so we'll focus on the other 2. The player's action and quantum material. The former requires some context of the latter to explain, so we'll start with that quantum material. The quantum moon is the most visually apparent body made of this material. The moon seems to teleport around the night sky, orbiting different planets at random, but it never does so while being observed. The second you look away, it's gone. In actuality, however, it could still be there, but it's merely elsewhere also. It's occupying multiple places simultaneously. I'm going to be massively oversimplifying here. There are people far smarter than I who can teach you way better than I could, linked below. Outer Wilds makes use of the idea of superposition. Essentially, all matter is made up of particles, which are finite points in space, and waves, which by their very definition have to take up
multiple points in space. As a result, by definition, these objects must take up multiple potential spots simultaneously. Of course, in reality, this phenomenon is unobservable on anything larger than an atom, but Outer Wilds introduces the idea of material which defies the laws of physics as we understand it, and is in multiple places simultaneously at an observable scale by the naked eye. As a result, the only physical manifestation of these quantum objects is one of many possible locations. When quantum material is looked at by the player, it will become stationary. However, upon looking away, it will seemingly vanish, but in reality, it is actually occupying all of its possible locations simultaneously. Quantum matter exists everywhere and nowhere simultaneously in Outer Wilds until it is observed, at which point it becomes a constant. The question Outer Wilds poses, however, is what if the entirety of the universe were to be consciously observed simultaneously?
Well, I'll leave that up to you to find out by playing the game for yourself. However, all of this is to say the mechanic of quantum material effectively enacts itself as, well, manipulable RNG, or random number generation. If an object is in one place but the player would prefer it to be elsewhere, simply ceasing observation of both its current and potential location will allow a new possibility to occur, effectively re-rolling its RNG. In a game on a 22-minute repeating timer, the time and place events occur is effectively fixated, without direct interference from the player, an anomaly in these loops. So in order for random occurrences to not become further outliers, breaking from Outer Wilds' key gameplay mechanic of expectancy, quantum material compromises flawlessly. It allows for variation per loop and yet complete agency to the player's role in it. In order to beat Outer Wilds and escape the time loop, the player must know where and when events are guaranteed to occur. And as they cannot bring back anything from a previous loop aside from their own memories, the only thing that changes is your knowledge of what to do. Much like knowing the path through a maze that leads you to the exit, understanding how quantum material works allows you to control it. Now, speaking of understanding, I suppose it's a bit unfair to state that nothing is gained aside from memories per cycle of Outer Wilds. Your ship is equipped with a log, which presumably by the main character's manual entry, keeps records of locations and discoveries from past loops. However, all this does is streamline the process of the player's recollection, giving you a journal of sorts to keep track of all the different puzzle pieces and seeing how they fit together. It's a compromise between a true reset of the galaxy per loop and reducing player confusion. We've all had that moment in a long-form RPG where you take a break for a few weeks, come back and realize, oh god, I have no idea what I was doing. While forgetting the past over time would be a realistic mechanic for Outer Wilds, it's not exactly an enjoyable one. Although you can actually disable the ship's log if you really wish to keep track of all this in your head or on pen and paper. Speaking of the player, their memories may be the only thing which survive a time loop in Outer Wilds, but within that 22-minute time span is still an entire planetary system of physics simulations and causal events, both big and small. Over 7 astral bodies are available to explore, and depending on when you arrive at different landmarks upon their crusts, something different will be happening across the cycle. So your exploration isn't simply across a large amount of space, it's also across the span of time. 22 minutes may not sound like a lot of time, but this is in comparison to most games' worlds, which are relatively stagnant. Mountains remain the same regardless of when you climb them. The planets in Outer Wilds are constantly in motion, constantly active. You have to then consider each planet as 22 minutes worth of different occurrences. The Brittle Hollow, for instance, looks completely different at the start of the loop than it does near its conclusion, when many of its pieces have been rearranged into a new cluster. Just because these events loop doesn't mean they're uninteresting, which is a good metaphor for the game's messaging as a whole. Just because something is small doesn't mean it's unimportant. Wandering the caverns of Ember Twin, falling into a black hole and curiously surviving, discovering a path through the torrents of Giant's Deep, and most importantly of all, learning about the race of people who lived in this system before you. Artifacts, ancient scrolls, and collaborative writings of the Nomi species give explanations as to the conditions of the planetary system, and if you dig deep enough, to the time loop itself. This writing is not mere lore, but rather the most important tool at the player's disposal for learning about the worlds in Outer Wilds. Trial and error do work, but expecting the player to die, come back, and have to spend all of the time getting back to the spot where they died guide to try something new is an inefficient method of teaching. Having characters long since passed discussing with one another about the best ways to not be eaten by giant anglerfish is a better teaching tool than the player trying countless times to learn so themselves. Both will work eventually, one is simply more satisfying and less time-consuming. Saving time is just as important as planning around it, as some areas can only be accessed at certain points during the time loop. Thankfully, these mechanics are usually a one-and-done sort of thing, rather than locking large areas which would require multiple loops to fully explore behind doors which mandate 10 or 20 minutes of waiting beforehand. Your reward is typically one major puzzle piece which a player shouldn't soon forget, hidden in an area which is only time-locked as part of a larger puzzle behind it. For instance, a small area with some text which reveals a massive plot twist, or the knowledge of how to reach other areas to explore elsewhere. Information is the currency upon which Outer Wilds is based, but once that information is spent, it cannot be reused, at least not to any level of satisfaction. Once you know how the game works, where to go, and how to successfully stop the time loop, that 22 minutes is all you need to act on said information. For a much simpler example, going back to Zelda, the Lost Woods areas of these games are only as complex as the path you're required to follow. Once you know to go northwest, southwest, spoiler warnings for Zelda 1, you don't have to take all the steps before to learn those directions. You can skip massive swaths of the game simply by remembering something from a previous playthrough. Outer Wilds is built around this concept. You're effectively writing a walkthrough for yourself piece by piece by discovering areas you previously thought were inaccessible, learning how quantum material works, and once you've found every piece and understand the order in which they're placed, does the full walkthrough reveal itself. The act of exploration and discovery is where the bulk of the game, and thus the enjoyment, comes from. So yes, once you understand how to complete Outer Wilds, it's a trivial experience. You could try to explore every last quadrant, but the goal of escaping the time loop is always doable once you're ready. However, the experience I had getting there, putting together the pieces myself and finding my way to the solution was absolutely magnificent. Outer Wilds still stands as one of the best games I've ever played despite a lack of replayability. According to the developers, the goal of Outer Wilds was to make a game with no real goal at all, simply letting the player explore as they wish, seeing everything this limited but complex space and time has to offer. However, there still has to be a catch, something to guide the player to explore. Games without any kind of goals at all inevitably reach the same point of becoming boring, once the player has done everything they wish to do, explored all they wish to see. Having closure allows for a bow to wrap things up, a satisfying conclusion which will leave the player happy with their time. And Outer Wilds' ending doesn't come out of nowhere, it's a decision made by the player when they are ready to move on. Between incorporating quantum mechanics as effectively manipulable RNG, preserving the true time reset nature of the universe, and the sheer volume of content waiting to be explored, Outer Wilds only ends once the player has gotten everything they wish to get out of it. If you can't solve the puzzle to complete the game, that just means you still have more to explore. So I have no problem with the game by its very design only working once, because what I got out of my one playthrough was so much wondrous writing, satisfying solutions, and exhilarating exploration. I wasn't left wanting more, but in this case, that's a good thing. I took the steps to complete the game knowing it would be the end of my journey. The light goes out, for it served its purpose. If you're at all interested in this interstellar adventure with clever puzzles, ingenious writing, and so much more, well, now's your chance to go and try it for yourself. It's linked in the description. If that's the case, thanks for watching and take it easy.